another suit. I can't even imagine wanting to waste taxpayer money, let alone my own money, on something like this. And I have a question for the attorney. If we have to go back to court for this, and we've already spent almost $67,000, the city side, that isn't even considering how much Mary has spent on attorneys. All we know is that you spent at least $8,000, and that was before we spent a whole day in court. And that was just because you said that in your deposition. But can we ask for attorney fees and court costs going back through the first case? Because
well, this is the same case. If the court grants the motion and reopens the case, then yes, we will be able to ask the court for an award of attorney's fees for the entire case. For the entire case, we could ask for that. Yes. Great. I'm just totally dumbfounded at this, and you know, there are some other things that were written in this that I was totally. It made me sick to my stomach when I read that there was an argument on Mary's behalf because our city attorney had not signed the agreement. Our city attorney passed away on January 1st. He was attending the funeral of his sister. His sister had been ill for a long time. We also had a holiday season there. I'm not sure any of us were signing things from December 19th on for a while. I'm sure Jim would have loved to have signed it. He always was a man of his word. I wish he were here, that he could have signed that. But all the agreement was that our attorney, Jim Windholz, would not have pursued his ethics complaint against you. Obviously, since he is no longer here, that's kind of a moot point. And I think it's rather crass to even bring that up. I'm appalled and amazed, and I will be quiet.
Joe.
Mary, I'm not going to gang up on you too much here, but what people ask me when I'm in the street and around my ward, they say, hey, good job on that Parks and Recreation Master Plan. When are we going to get a park in our area? And I say, well, you know, it's in the plan, and, you know, we're certainly going to talk about that. Ward 1 and 2 is identified as an area that's somewhat underserved. When they say, well, why do you spend so much money on lawsuits? I say, well, some of those aren't our idea. And they say, well, you guys got to take care of that business because it's expensive, and we're taxpayers, and our tax dollars are not going for services and facilities that we desire. And I said, well, some of that is because of communication. And if any of us have ever been in a relationship or married, it's tough. Communication is very difficult. And up here, there's 6 or 7 of us. Sometimes we include other folks, and it gets to be 8 or 9, but it is hard to communicate. But this could have been solved. A lot of this could have been solved by some forward communication on Mary with all of us. So I'd like to encourage that before we spend additional tax dollars, folks. You guys are paying a lot of money in this town to live here. Our businesses are paying sales tax. We've got all kinds of, you know, you've got dog license fees and other things, and it's time that we get some of this stuff over with and using that money for the purpose that you direct us to, which is for the good of the community, the health, safety, and welfare of you residents.
Amen.
All right, I want to move us along. I will reiterate, if anybody ever wants to talk to me about our goals for the year, our agenda, problems with the process that we're following, anything else that we're doing, please call me anytime. As you all know, I am more than happy to meet with any of you whenever, and I'd certainly prefer that you call me and raise an issue with me before you file.
Can we call them $67,000 questions?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to move us on to 7A, which was the item pulled from the consent agenda. Approval on first reading, it's ordinance 1803. Mary, you had that pulled.
Yes, Steve, can you tell me who owns that land?
Who owns the land subject to the amendment?
Yes.
There are 2 owners, the Jefferson County Finance Corporation is one, and Jefferson County is the other.
But they're not the ones that that are applying for the amendment?
I'm sorry, the amendment was applied for an application by the Regional Transportation District. At the requirement of the county was that the RTD who would like to build a facility on what is now county land be the applicant.
Isn't
There
it-
are letters of authorization from the owners within the file.
Isn't it our requirement that the person applying for a PUD or a PUD amendment has a fee interest in the land?
No. No, it's a
That's
requirement.
not what
Our requirement is that the fee interest owners consent to the application for the land that is subject to the rezoning.
I don't think that's what it says in the ordinance. I believe that I remember seeing that it said that the applicant has to have a fee interest.
The Chapter 1848, which is the requirement for rezoning, clearly allows someone other than an owner to apply for a rezoning by having a letter of consent from the owner. And it is my belief that that qualifies for any language in Chapter 1828, 350, that requires the owners to be a part of the application and to consent to it.
Okay, 1828.330 says the PUD application must be filed by persons having a fee interest.
Well, they have consented to it by their letter.
That's not what it says here. It doesn't say consented to, it says the applicant must have a fee interest.
I don't know if Mr. Williamson has another response. Ma'am, Chapter 1848 also rules, it is the common practice anywhere in this country, and it is consistent with decades of implementation of our code, that an owner's consent qualifies for the owner's consent in a land use case.
Dave?
And that's correct. I don't have Chapter 18 in front of me, but I specifically recall when we drafted this several years ago, it's quite common for a contract purchaser to come to the city and request rezoning of property, and we specifically provided for in our code that under those circumstances, someone other than an owner could come forward for rezoning, provided that the owner consented.
Where is that in the code?
I don't have the code in front of me, but I would be happy to look it up for you.
1848, either 010 or 020.
Is this something we could move on? We could come back to this issue if you needed a few minutes to, if that's something you could look up easily, the specific citation.
If you like, yes.
Or you could pass it on first reading, and we could do it before the next meeting.
That would work. That would work for me, at least. Marjorie?
Yeah, I would just like to make a comment that this is another example of lack of communication. Rather than bringing this up and having everyone spend their time, Mary, you could have checked with staff beforehand so that they would have the code provisions here, and there could be a reasonable discussion of it instead of essentially sandbagging people.
Well, you can call me any name you want, Marge. I mean, just sandbag, whatever. But I have some questions, and I think that they need to be made public and not just swept under the rug and ask them quietly. I don't believe that the code says that someone else can do that. I believe that I've read the code pretty well. It says PUD applicant must be filed by the persons having a fee interest. That's exactly what it says.
Jacob?
So Dave, can you suggest process-wise how we could set this aside long enough for Steve to look up the specific language and we can continue on the agenda so we don't all sit here watching Steve?
You can pass it on the agenda, come back to it later this evening. You can pass it on First Amendment or first reading, and we'll look at it in the next 2 weeks.
So we could just stop the conversation now and come back to it later on this evening.
Yes.
We don't have to take some action to set it aside.
No, I think a motion to, I mean, you've already called the agenda item. I think a motion to continue it till later on in the evening would be appropriate.
Okay, well, I would say either one. If you're ready to pass it on first reading, we can do that.
May
and
I
have this
ask one more
extended-
question?
Yeah, but please don't interrupt me. If you are ready to pass this on first reading, we can do that and have this extended conversation when it comes back up on second reading. If you would rather have Steve look up the specific code language and discuss this further tonight, that's the other option. Yes, Mary?